everybody. It's Monday morning for us. This will go out at 6 o'clock, so it's 6 o'clock for you, because I'm sure you couldn't wait to race to get to this. So welcome. This is Wycombe Wanderers Plus, and this is Chairboys Chat. We're going to be looking at a few things, one being Sam Allardyce, and is he as sort of a bit of a thuggish manager as people think? Is he similar, in fact, to Ainsworth? And does he really rely on all the statistics? And would these statistics help him? That De Bruyne actually walks on a football pitch further than any other player. Milner is one of the top 5 joggers on a football pitch. And Kane is one of the lowest sprinters on a football pitch. And Grealish, of course, is the fastest. Okay, off we go then. Wycombe Wanderers. Where do we go with this, Kieran?
No, I haven't mentioned it to you yet, because we haven't really had a chat about Wycombe. But looks extremely bleak. Looks extremely bleak. The last 2 games, you've got Birmingham and Nottingham Forest, who are both near the bottom, are both not too great. They were both at home as well. We got 1 point out of that, and that was partly because Allsop made ridiculous saves. I don't want to be the pessimistic person who says we have no chance, but it's kind of getting to that stage.
Yeah, we've got no chance. But we know that at the beginning of the season. Did we really know that?
Well, it got to the point where we were building up a bit of hope. We had a bit of a little streak where we had Uche coming in, we had Mehmeti, who was playing well for a few games, and we were getting a few results here and there. And then the last month or so has just looked a bit.
Isn't that the worst thing you can do? Sort of give yourself
build up hope.
Yeah. If we'd known straight away that we were getting slaughtered every game, well, we'd just put your feet up and sort of see how little the slaughter was.
But the thing is, we say this, there's still a little part of me that's kind of like, we could get a few points here and there. We could kind of climb a little bit back up. But if we're going to be totally realistic, then
I did say in my video, which you've obviously not watched.
No, because that would be depressing.
Ready for tomorrow night. I did say, actually, I've taken it on board. We're not staying up. But, hey, let's at least try and see if we can catch Sheffield Wednesday. We are only 9 points behind with 1 game in hand, and we're playing them tomorrow. There is a chance we could catch it. I mean, they're awful as well. Yeah. So, looking at it like that, I mean, Sheffield Wednesday are in trouble. They don't have a manager. 13 of their players leave in the summer, so I don't know what their enthusiasm will be like. Their best player is one that they brought in only a couple of months ago, and he's a centre-back. So, we do stand a chance of beating them, I think.
You wonder what Sheffield Wednesday fans think of their team as opposed to what we think of our team. Because we still look at our team and think, oh, that's pretty good. We're doing some decent things here and there. You wonder if they look at their team being like, this is absolutely trash.
Can I say that's me and you? If you look up what other
We're optimistic, yeah.
Right. I mean, we do drink too much. I mean, that's the truth.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I think that's what it is.
Apologies.
I mean, there's been a little bit of criticism of Ainsworth. I'm not going to just sort of have a go and say, oh, well, you shouldn't say that about your manager, blah, blah, blah. Do you think that person, he's been watching Wycombe for years, I might add, possibly before me. So, does he have any right to think of Ainsworth as time to go?
Time to go is nowhere near what the situation is, but you do look at a few of the decisions he made in terms of the teams he picked and be like, why on earth would you do that? Because the main one that I saw on the Facebook group thing was Bloomfield playing
Yeah.
which everything is like as I like to say before I rip into any player. Ultimate respect for him. He's been at our club for however many years. It's ridiculous how long he's been there,
Yeah.
and he's done very well. But he's unbelievably slow, and he's
It's
not a
time.
championship
Yeah.
player.
But he keeps bringing on
But
Aki Fenwer as well.
And he keeps bringing on Bayo, bless him, probably just so he can get his championship goal.
He won't know, will he?
He's not going to. We need a penalty. That's all we need. You need a penalty, sub him on, and then you can sub him off again.
Yeah. Well, I did notice. Fred fell over pretty well actually in the last game. He was better at it than my friend up front.
I'm sure he was.
He picked up a lot of fouls actually, so maybe we want to put him in the box a bit more and try and get that penalty.
Yeah,
it's difficult, isn't it? It is difficult. It's not easy watching your team lose game in, game out. That is hard to take.
I think this is where I'm pretty decent at it now. I never used to be, but I'm decent at putting things in perspective. Hence, with both my teams at the moment, we've got to put into perspective that Wycombe shouldn't be where they are, and we've said that an awful lot, but it is just true. And a lot of the players that we have are doing extremely well at times, considering the position they're in. Liverpool don't have any centre backs, and we did win the league last season, so you got to be happy with some things.
And the European Cup the year before that, City.
Exactly. Wycombe, like, because we've gotten the Championship once, this gives us opportunities to get into it again. We've gone into a place that we've never got into before, and so it gives you a bit of belief and a bit of hope as a fan that we can kind of push on from here. The owners can kind of push on from here and say, we can get in there again. We've done it before. Why can't we? And then next time when we get in the Championship, we'll have a little bit more experience of what to do, what we know. We'll have different players. Who knows what may happen?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we take. I don't like this comment that you always get the managers that lose, and the managers that win will always say, well, the other team, they were good, and you think, no, they weren't, they were trash. And then you get I'm sure Southampton were considered to be a good team when they lost 9-0, but then the teams that lose always say, we'll learn from this. But I think in this case, we really will. I think we've improved our team for next year. I do.
Yeah. I mean, we may lose one or two because I can't. Horgan was in the Premiership in Scotland last season. I can't imagine he's one to be playing League One next season, for example. But our team was a heck of a lot better than it was last season, in my opinion.
The problem is though is what's up here when we go back down.
Yeah.
Are they going to go down after another 20 games of losing with the fight?
I mean, I think Ainsworth is one for putting that into players' minds that they should keep the confidence, they should be proud of what they've done before and use that to push forward. I'd say one of the things is that he's got to get probably get a bit more experience in that team, in the sense that JJ's 34, Akinfenwa was probably going to retire after this season. Charles is supposed to be one of the big personalities in the dressing room. He's about 50. And so I think that'll be where he needs some players to kind of step up in terms of experience and help the younger ones. We've got a lot of younger players as well, like Mehmeti, etc., and kind of put them on the straight and narrows to we did really well getting there. We're now back in League One. I'd say let's stick in League One for a season, maybe get mid-table, just make sure we don't have an absolute catastrophe and get involved in another relegation fight, and then we push on after that season.
So you'd keep those older players to help them next year?
This is the thing. I think it's probably a lot down to the players' decision because they're all kind of near retirement. But I would still keep someone like JJ because I think he's just about got it in him to keep playing. Bayo and Charles probably not.
Time to go. Yeah.
It's, I mean, bless them, probably time to retire. Like they are, like players go at like 35, 36 these days because they can't keep up with the pace of the game. They are 38, 39.
I know.
And like no disrespect, they're flipping old like they are in football terms. So I would personally say yes, it's probably time to let go.
Okay. I just, I've got no clock around me at all. I really should have, because, okay, moving on, the EFL. I'm going to do a quick, they're going to be quick, up the top of the EFL. Okay, now, we all thought, as you usually do, the 3 teams that come down will be going straight back up. They've all had a bit of a catastrophe. They've all suddenly messed it up. Okay, Norwich are at the top. They were bombing along, and I've said week in, week out, they've won it, don't worry about that place, that's Norwich's. Okay, well, 4 games without a win and 4 games without a goal.
Oh, where have you heard that one before?
Yeah, so what the fiddle is happening with Norwich? Well, I think, could Daniel Farke start looking and worrying about his job? Because if Norwich start going down that table with the likes of, come to the 2 teams that are knocking on the door of taking those 2 spots. I mean, they lost 2-0 to Swansea, talking of one of them, on Saturday. And they're only 2 points behind with a game in hand. Norwich look like they could be in trouble. Now, Farke has been there since May 2017. He's this tells you something. He's the 14th longest serving manager in a football league, and he's been there since 2017. Isn't that shocking? Talk about you don't last long. There's one player that he doesn't have available. I don't know how long this guy's out. I won't be able to pronounce it. It's Emi Buendia. Right, thank you. And they've only won 1 league game without him. Okay. And he's out, and he's going to be out, I believe, for a little while. I think they're in trouble. Admittedly, he's only missed about 10 games since he turned up, so that's sort of a bit unfair sort of statistics. But are Norwich in trouble?
I mean, if you're in this sort of form going into February, March, then you're definitely in trouble. The teams they've lost/drawn against as well is pretty poor. This was an FA Cup they lost to Barnsley in, but they still lost to Barnsley.
Yeah.
0-0 at home to Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
Fair play for keeping Middlesbrough out because they're a decent attacking force, but again, not scoring at home, you're always going to be in trouble. Then they drew 0-0 with Millwall, which is really poor.
Yes.
Losing away to Swansea, I think it's fair enough. Like you're going to have a result or 2 like that, but you'd be worried not scoring a goal at all against Norwich and Middlesbrough.
Well, you'd worry about not scoring any goal for 4 games.
Any goal? No, exactly.
You're not in a good place, are you? It's not, there's enough teams knocking on the door. It's not like they're in a race with 3 teams to get 2 points. There's more than that. That's the problem. There's a lot of teams in there.
They do have a little bit of a cushion, to be fair to them. Well, I mean, you said that you thought they'd run away with it, and this little run, if they can get out of it, they should be fine. Because you have Norwich, Brentford, and Swansea, and then there's a little gap where there's Reading, Watford, and Bournemouth. So they could be okay as long as they pick up their form a bit.
Well, while you've got that on there, Bournemouth were actually the favourites out of all of them originally,
And they
but they're
should
in
be.
6th place. They did beat Birmingham 3-2. Do you think it was a mistake to get rid of Eddie Howe originally? Because they've just sacked their next manager. James Tyndall went last Wednesday. So let's ask, first of all, was it a mistake to get rid of Eddie Howe? Should they not have brought him down with them?
I don't think it's a bad thing to mix it up a bit. Sorry, and I think probably Eddie Howe himself, from seeing the few TV appearances he's done, you kind of get the impression that he kind of wants to mix up a bit.
He
But
didn't show too much belief or energy in himself.
no, but you have to. But it's the thing of you don't know what you've got until it's gone, isn't it? And they're struggling without him.
That is it.
Because the style of players they bring in were kind of perfect to what Eddie Howe wanted. They were young, they were quick, nimble kind of players, and it's evident that the managers since haven't been able to really pick up on that kind of philosophy that he has at that club.
Trouble is, Jason Tyndall was never really a manager.
I don't even know who he is, not going to lie.
Right, he was just brought in through the team.
Oh.
And he lasted 6 months.
Never normally goes well with doing that, does it?
No. And he's the fourth. They've lost 4 out of the last 5. So they're not exactly bombing along, are they?
No.
I mean, they're not even doing average. They're doing worse than average, which means, and they're in 6th place. They might not even make the playoffs.
I mean, they've won 12 out of 28 games. Like there's 6. They've obviously lost or drawn more than they've won, and that's never a good sign, is it?
No, and they were all at the beginning.
Yeah,
it's the problem. They've just appointed Jonathan Woodgate. I don't know whether you recognise that name.
Really? Yeah.
He turned up about 2 days before they sacked the manager as a first team coach. Then the manager went, and then he stood up and said, and they gave him the job. I wonder. And he's going to be standing in for now. But that's dangerous as well, because you've got another guy who's not a manager. Admittedly, you're not going to sort of go for, the trouble is that managers that are out there at the moment, are all those that have just been sacked for doing badly. I mean, because managers get sacked at Christmas. And so everybody out there are all the ones that have been sat out there that were sacked at Christmas. Watford were the next team, and they are 5th. Now I will stop at this point just to say about Watford and what I know. Watford drew 0-0 with Coventry. This is a comment from one of their supporters against Coventry. What is this manager watching? This is utter garbage. Interestingly, they've got the best home record. They've got the 2nd tightest defence. They've got a strong squad, but they've only actually scored 7 goals in open play.
Who, Watford? That's trash. We've scored more than that.
Yeah. I mean, Brentford's Ivan Toney has scored 20 himself, but their 4 strikers have scored 7 in open play between all 4. Is that dreadful or what? They have Deeney, Gray. You should see what the fans write about him. And basically, what you've got mass argument in the changing rooms. And one player actually turned to the manager during the game against Coventry, swore at the manager and said, "What do you think I'm supposed to effing be doing? You told me to press and I'm pressing. So what do you want me to do?" And that was on the pitch. They haven't a clue. Do you know, they were set up the day before to play, well, I think it was 3-5-2. They turned up, and as they were going onto the football pitch, the manager told them he'd changed his mind. So all the training the day before, we're now going to play 4-4-2. So just get into that position and play that. The players didn't have a clue what they were doing. And that was against Coventry. They drew 0-0. They are shocking. I tell you what, well, I don't know what they're going to end up. So the 3 that came down, they're going to be lucky to go back up.
No. Well, they'll be finding out in the playoffs, won't they?
Yeah. I think one of those teams might make it up. And the other 2 I've been going on about week in, week out are Brentford and Swansea.
I mean, just looking at typing up the Watford manager's name, doesn't appear that he's had a job before, I don't think. Or he may have had one small one, because he's only 40 years old and was a Spanish winger. So it's not like, he managed to side in Georgia, apparently. So where on earth do you, did the Watford people find him and think, oh yeah, he's the guy we need? This, you do wonder. You do wonder with that club's management.
But they tried to get rid of a load of their players because they're paying so much out and they got too many players. They tried to get rid of them in the January window and nobody wanted them.
Well, nobody could afford them, probably.
Well, that is exactly it. Okay, we'll give the EFL a miss. There's your top 3. We've discussed Wycombe and oh joy, we are looking forward to playing again in League One next year. Let's just enjoy what we've got. We're now going to come to a manager who I have a lot of respect for, that people take the mickey out of and think he's useless and rubbish, and all he does is save teams from going down or not. This is about Sam Allardyce, and so let's just watch this that I recorded earlier. Hi. We are going to record this bit in little bits so that when I make a mistake I won't have to go all the way to the start. But what this is about is Sam Allardyce and Gareth Ainsworth, and just how similar are they. It almost comes across as a bit of an insult, or so we feel, to say you're a similar manager to Sam Allardyce. But once upon a time somebody asked Sir Alex Ferguson, so what's it like to be the best manager in the world? And his reply was, you'll have to ask Sam Allardyce that. Sir Alex Ferguson honestly felt Sam Allardyce was the best manager in the world. And we look at that and almost laugh, but it's because we don't understand or realise what Sam Allardyce has done in football in this country for the last 30, 40 years. Now, Sam started his sort of as a coach, etc., way back in probably the 80s, I think, and he was it was for a team called the Tampa Bay Rowdies, or locally known as the Fannies. Now, they shared a lot of the ground, etc., with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, yet the American football team, who were really rich. Now, when Sam had a look and was taken round and showed what they do, he soon realised that in America they treated any American sports person as an athlete, not as a footballer or a soccer person, but an athlete. And what he found was, I will read this out, what he found was the different methods they used in sport. Now, he found just in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who had 60 players, he found they had individual coaches, sports psychologists, psychiatrists, head coach, 6 physios, game analysts who went through the different ways every team played so they'd know what to do, the fitness coaches, strength and conditioning coaches. They had somebody in charge of the supplements, somebody in charge who was a nutritionist. They had somebody in charge of fluids. They even had 3 staff just to put the strap-ins on. Now, when he saw all this and the difference it made to winning, he wanted to bring that back over here. But of course he hadn't had any job as a manager yet, but he was so impressed with that he wanted to bring that into this country, and he wanted to be a manager. So where did Sam Allardyce start? Well, he started pretty small. He knew he'd have to start at the bottom, and that was definitely where he started. He got a phone call. I loved this. He got a phone call by a Catholic priest called Father Joe Young. And when Father Joe Young gave Sam Allardyce a call and he said, "We want you as a manager over here for Limerick FC," Sam thought this was a complete prank and told him to F off. Well, in fact, it was the chairman of Limerick FC, or locally known as Stab City due to the knife crime out there. It was, in fact, Father Joe Young phoning him. He'd known Sam Allardyce from when he had played as a player, and he knew he was looking for a job and they were desperate. So Sam Allardyce got on a plane, flew over to Ireland, and was met at the airport by Father Joe Young, who then took him around and went past a great stand somewhere that looked really impressive, and Sam Allardyce was very, very impressed, only to be told, "I'm sorry, that isn't ours, that's Munster's rugby ground." And then he took him along to Limerick FC, where his jaw dropped, and Father Joe Young said, "But remember, nothing is impossible to those who believe." And Sam Allardyce believed, took the job and stayed. Now the problem was, of course, there was no money. In fact, they used to spend some time going around the town asking for money because of the lack of, and yet already he'd decided to bring what he'd learnt in America over to his job in Ireland. And so of course they couldn't afford all these people to do the job, but he straight away started explaining to them about you not drinking before the games, etc. Because still quite often over here people would have a brandy or whiskey before running out onto a football pitch. And in fact, if you look at Wycombe Wanderers game against Middlesbrough, you'll see the Wycombe Wanderers playing, this is back a bit earlier than that, I might add, not the last game, where the Wycombe players are having a fag after the game. Things were different then, but Sam Allardyce wanted to change that. And when he discovered that one of his players in Limerick even had been out the night before having a few drinks, he actually told him, "You're here for your fans, give me your shirt back, you're not playing for a few weeks." And that is how he treated football. He was serious, even at Limerick FC. So when the money run out over there, he needed to move on. He did, by the way, get Limerick promoted. He didn't just save them from anything, he got them promoted. He just had no money, and they were relying on donations, and even those run out. So he next got a job as a coach, I think, in Preston, but he wasn't happy there. They didn't get on there, and he was offered a manager's job at Blackpool. Now they were doing really, really bad, and this is where he brought some more of what he'd learnt in America to Blackpool. Still not with enough money, but again, that wasn't the worst thing in the world. He just brought some of it with him. Sam Allardyce was about 6 years in front of the rest of the managers, etc., in this country. He was way in front of his time with the idea of using data, nutrition, etc. And all those things I mentioned, the way he sort of brought coaches in for separate things, etc. And he was way in front of his time, and this meant teams that he started to manage were successful. It was enough, he felt, to give them 10% more than other teams on a football pitch. So he used some of the methods that they could just afford, not all of them obviously, into this, and Blackpool were at their height while he was there. They got close to the playoffs. They got close to the playoffs. They got into the playoffs, but then lost. And this was where, although having never been that high before, this is where the owner, who was in prison at the time for rape, got in touch and told him he was sacked. Next job was Notts County. Notts County couldn't stop them going down. It'd been brought in at a time they didn't stand a chance. But then the following season, he got them promoted back up. They actually won that league by 17 points. When he walked into Notts County, again he brought all his data, all his sports science, all the diets with him. They had never heard of any of this stuff before. It wasn't even used in the Premier League at this time, apart from maybe one other manager, I think. We'll talk about him maybe with Kieran in a minute. But Sam Allardyce started employing people who could do a better job than him in certain parts of the football pitch. So, for instance, goalkeeping coaches, etc. He started looking at spending some of the money that he was getting to just keep making small improvements. And again, back in 1999, along came probably his biggest success, and that was the job as manager of Bolton. Now, Bolton had been relegated from the Premier League, but within 6 years they were now playing in Europe under Sam Allardyce. He'd brought in international football stars who wanted to play for Sam Allardyce. They spent 4 years while he was there in the top 8 of the Premier League, for goodness sake. And also at Bolton, now he could bring in his beliefs in there. They'd got the money. He actually had 36 staff working for him on all these jobs that he'd seen in America. He worked out the runs, the speed, the crosses, how many crosses, how people defended, what happened if you moved the ball from one side of the pitch to the other, how did the other players, how did the opposition, what format did they work into, what was their groupings, who did this, who did that. He put all of this into his job. Other people didn't. They put 11 people on a football pitch, worked on the theory, he runs fast, he can be a defender. But Sam Allardyce had got more than that. He knew what he was doing. And in fact, out of those 36 people, some of the staff that he brought in are still at Manchester City, are at Arsenal, and are at Liverpool, because they were the best. Of course, it wasn't just all of this sports science, but it was also about his personality. Now, the players had to join in with what he believed. If they weren't a part of what Sam Allardyce wanted, then they were out. There wasn't a choice. He was in front, he run it, he was good, he was a laugh and fun, but also the boss. Now, we will talk again. I mean, Ainsworth, Allardyce. Yeah, he used statistics when buying players. He could move players around a football pitch as they got older, working out what their great skills were and what was declining. Because as a player, gets older, they get better at different things. They've got more skill in different things. You're still learning, for goodness sake. At the age of 32, 33, you're still learning and getting better at football, even if your speed is slowing down. His man management was massive in a dressing room. He cared that people wanted to go to work. He made them want to come to the training ground. In fact, at Bolton, with some of the money, with some of the success, he made sure that the training ground was the best training ground at Bolton than any other team in the Premier League. He wanted players to enjoy themselves. He knew what happened in the mind had an effect on what happened at their feet, and he knew what they ate, how they slept. He'd worked all this out, and he was the first to bring this in. And in fact, when other managers started bringing this stuff in, they were always just a little bit behind him. He'd been using this information, this stuff, for years, and they had only just started picking it up. He was way in front of his time. Now, I could carry on with this, but it'll go a bit too long. I'm going to finish with the Bolton, just to say whether he was... I'm not going to discuss his England, because etc. But after this, he then started being given jobs saving teams, and I feel that's a bit unfair. He was more than that. English managers aren't treated as fairly, in my opinion, as foreign managers. We bring them in, don't we? And in fact, I know Sam Allardyce thinks the best three managers in the world are Mourinho, Guardiola and Klopp. They are who he considers to be the best. But I also think that he never really got a chance to take on a big team and succeed. He's been given jobs since Bolton where it's a question of survival, and not much chance of one, as with West Brom. Okay, now Kieran's seen me notes, because he obviously hasn't seen that film that I've just loaded up. I don't have my notes even, so I've got to try and remember what I said. So how similar is Sam Allardyce to Gareth Ainsworth?
Well, in terms of the statistics and all that sort of thing.
Just the way he plays, I mean, this idea that all he does is play long ball and he doesn't think about anything else and he's got no talent for working anything out. Do you think that's a load of rubbish?
He plays to the player's strengths, so that's the main similarity between the two, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Because he knows that the Wycombe defender's strength is not to play around the back. He knows it's probably just hoof it up the front, and so he bought players in that will be able to accompany that. Similarly to Allardyce, he goes into maybe a lower league, lower table Premier League team and sees that his best opportunity of getting them out of there is to do hoofball, probably.
But he wasn't just a hoofball manager.
He wasn't.
Originally, I feel a bit sorry for him, because I think he's better than that. He's just ended up with a title. And I wonder whether Ainsworth will end up with a title, that he managed Wycombe, a team at the bottom, and he helped a team that didn't stand a chance achieve more than they did. I mean, originally, I've done it up to Newcastle, or I did it up to Bolton. Now, didn't he... I mean, at that point, he hadn't only achieved staying up, he'd actually brought in get into Europe. He'd put Bolton at the top of a league. You know, he'd won leagues. He hadn't just saved the ones at the bottom. Surely, what a bigger team should have. Why didn't a bigger team ever take him on?
England did, didn't they?
Yes, he does make comments about that, and he said, the comment he makes is, if I was guilty, why did they pay me off? Which I think is an interesting comment,
Well,
because it was never proved.
Was it not?
No.
That's interesting. The thing is that people's opinions in football can change extremely quickly, and they can make assumptions about people. My generation of kids growing up, we saw Allardyce's teams and was like, hoofball. That was the first we saw of it. You would have seen the other stuff that happened at Bolton, etc. So we got this impression of him and just ran with it. And then when he got the England job, we were all like, so we're going to have England playing hoofball now. Whereas that probably wouldn't have been the case.
No.
It wouldn't have been the case.
Well, look at all those statistics. You do sports science and all that. What do you think about all that story?
Well, so football's all about, or sport in general is all about marginal gains. There's so many players you could have a look at and say, because of this one probably very minute thing, whether it be psychology, whether it be nutrition, whether it be strength conditioning. We'll take Vardy, for example, because that's a pretty good one. He was in non-league until about the age of 26, 27 or something.
Fleetwood, wasn't it?
Fleetwood. And he probably quite luckily, Leicester went and got him, or maybe they flipping did their research and knew what he was going to become. Like, probably the changes that happened at Leicester, whether that be psychology or nutrition, I don't know, meant that he went from being this non-league footballer to one of the best footballers in the Premier League. And it can happen with so many players just based off marginal gains. It's ridiculous how it
doesn't he? Sam Allardyce says, you know, none of this stuff is going to turn an idiot into a superstar, but what it does is give you 10% more.
Yeah, football pre-1990s, let's say, wouldn't have had the same players that you remember as you do. There would have been a heck of a lot of other players, a lot of other better players than the ones that we do remember, because there was no nutrition, there was no psychology, there was nothing effectively then. People just turned up to training and then went to a match, probably had alcohol, etc.
Yeah.
And so football would have been completely different, and football is completely different now, which is why, like, you see teams buy players from flipping Spanish second division teams and be like, why on earth have you done that? And then they turn out to be one of the best players in their position in the Premier League or something.
Well, like Foden is one, isn't it? Foden is one.
Foden. Well, how the flip can you look at Foden? Like, the things that Foden does, like, you're like, yeah, extremely good. But then there's probably a kid who's like 18, 19, who's like, I could do that. But you don't have. But people have got to look at that player's, like, the way they carry themselves, the way they deal with situations, and see that yes, he is the right person to do that job.
He's basically moved on by about 10%, and it's enough to turn him to okay into everybody's thinking, blimey, isn't he good?
Yeah. But Foden's a ridiculous example. Like, the only reason that I probably don't appreciate him as much as I do is because he plays for Man City, and that's just boring.
But that's interesting that some of these players, I'm be fascinated to know that in Everton they look okay. When they move them out, they look really good. And I'd be fascinated to see the background. The same applies with Southampton, doesn't it?
Yeah.
At Liverpool, they looked superstars. In Southampton, they looked okay. But I'd be fascinated to know the background that City and Liverpool used to find them out and to pick them and to know which player does what and how they would fit in the team. There's a lot of that. But what gets me is Sam Allardyce did it first.
Mm.
And people don't appreciate that. And that's why I wanted to make that, to show people he isn't just a sort of northern sort of plod, belt it up the front. He's more than that. He actually brought athleticism into football. And he changed, along with Wenger. He does bring out that comment about Wenger. And also, I do want to pick, that wasn't a daft comment by Alex Ferguson, just saying, oh, you know, when they asked Alex Ferguson, what's it like being the best manager in the world? And he said, ask Sam Allardyce. They used to have lots of conversation over the phone, and Allardyce used to ask Ferguson's advice for things. They were actually friends.
Mm.
Then he meant it. Ferguson meant it.
I suppose that you probably give the reasons to why Allardyce never got a top Premier League job, for example, was probably because he's probably not the most aesthetically pleasing manager, if you know what I mean. Because you have your Mourinho's, your Wenger's, your Ferguson's, who were kind of like, they were staple names, and you knew that. I know it's difficult to explain, but then you have Allardyce, and it's kind of like, oh, we're getting him, are we? It's not the most attractive person you could get, whereas in reality, it probably was. Why he didn't get a decent job after Bolton is a bit annoying.
I just hope, like mad, that Ainsworth doesn't end up in the same boat of getting this title above him. I think whatever job he gets next needs to be more than having a little team in a big league. I think he needs an average team in the average league. He needs a Reading in the Championship rather than a Fleetwood or a, you know, I think he needs a reasonable team that sit in the middle to get that experience.
QPR has been thrown around many a time, hasn't it?
Yes, but that is the sort of job he needs rather than getting Fleetwood or, you know, one of these sort of, well, Wycombe. And just to say, I did watch West Brom play against Tottenham, wasn't it? No, the poor bloke. I mean, he doesn't stand a hope, in all fairness. It doesn't matter how good he is. It does. There's their striker, is it Diana or something, Diana up front, who scored 2 goals, both disallowed, and had a really good third opportunity. And he was caught offside 3 times. And what he did was he stood offside while the play was back here. And what he was going to do was come back onside as the ball moved up. He was lazy. And of course, the trouble is, as he goes to go onside at the last possible moment, a Tottenham player just stood in front of him and he couldn't get back onside. And he was dreadful. I mean, I tell you, if I was Sam Allardyce, actually smiled at it. He smiled at it. He must be wondering. I mean, I know why he took the job. It's because he's missed the job. But he never stood a hope with West Brom, in all fairness. No. I hope they don't put him down for it.
I mean, the thing, he's lost his record if they do go down. He's lost his record of keeping teams up. Yeah. Which would be unfortunate.
Okay. Now, again, time-wise, remember we've had that 20-minute clip. So we've probably got about 10 minutes left. I'm just going to... I've got tons of things down here. So let's go through. Are we going to talk about the next set of games?
We can do that.
Yeah. Do that.
Blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
I mean, there's FA Cup midweek, but we're not going to do that.
No.
There aren't many very interesting games in it anymore.
We can bring up the last games while discussing the games. Okay.
Oh, here we are. First one, Leicester versus Liverpool.
Excellent. Okay. Well, the first question, we've got to ask on this one, and we will bring this up again in a minute. Is Vardy irreplaceable for Leicester? And is Van Dijk irreplaceable for Liverpool?
So, in terms of Vardy, the first thing that came to my mind was name a striker in the league that's like him. There isn't one.
No.
So, saying he's irreplaceable, you can probably find someone somewhere in the world, but the same personality, the same tenacity that he has, irreplaceable. Probably not, because you can probably find someone who can do a job, but for the job he does, no. There's no one out there, I don't think.
Van Dijk? I mean, because quite simply, Liverpool without him have been pretty shocking.
Well,
why haven't they done anything about it?
Well, so here we go. The first 2 months or so after he was out, we were very good. We were still top of the league. We were top of the league at Christmas, actually. Recently, it's just all gone to pot. This is where we talk about marginal gain, isn't it? Just the loss of confidence in that team. Or yesterday was like no one wanted to tackle Sterling or Foden in the box.
No.
Like, because you've seen it before from Trent. Trent isn't the best at defending anyway, but Sterling
they score something like, is it 95% in the box, City?
Yeah,
so they should have been ready for that.
Sterling just ran a ring.
Tap-ins. City score tap-ins.
The thing that surprised me was Foden going around Robertson a number of times, because Robbo's always been a decent defender and a very good defender, but he looks scared of tackling people in the box. He didn't want to do it. But then the thing is that people can say these excuses or explanation. I prefer to call them explanations to why I've been bad. Because people say excuses, making it sound like I'm defending Liverpool. I'm not. I'm saying that Liverpool are very, very bad at the moment, because we are. But the explanations are there for why. We don't have centre backs. We've just bought two. Hopefully, we can actually get those two people in. Whether it will be both, I doubt, because you wouldn't want to just throw in two people he's just bought.
I don't know, because I would, and then move your two other players up into the midfield where they should be. Because let's be honest, Fabinho he got walked, didn't he? I mean, he didn't know what to do because there was no number 9 on the pitch. He would normally track the number 9.
True.
But there was no number 9. And he got lost in there. He didn't know whether he was coming or going. He's not a professional centre-back, and he doesn't know the job. It's easy if you say, right, as a centre-back, your job is keep your eye on this guy. But he didn't have that, and he just got lost on that football pitch.
That's where having your CDM as a centre-back just makes it a heck of a lot more difficult. He's obviously been fine when there has been a number 9. I think against Kane at Anfield, he was fantastic. But when you don't have a centre-back, Virgil would know what to do in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. He's a professional centre-back.
Exactly.
That's why I think you'd be better off putting any of those centre-backs on there, because at least they'd know their job. And it would mean that Fabinho would be able to go and do his job.
I hope Klopp does eventually get to the point where he does put the two centre-backs in. I don't think it'll be yet, because I don't think he normally does that. But I hope he does at some point. One thing I will say, though, is we say how bad Liverpool have been, we could so easily have got a draw out of that game.
Yeah.
If Alisson hadn't made the two mistakes, we would have got a draw.
Okay. Right.
So
I've got 3 questions, and these have got to be quick, all right? Because everybody's talking about Liverpool. So we'll be quick, okay? The first one is, why do keepers never get substituted when they make a dreadful error?
Doesn't affect the play going forward, really, in terms of scoring goals, which is what we needed at the time.
Because they don't, do they? When was the last time you saw a goalkeeper substituted for having a bad game?
They don't, do they? But imagine the loss of confidence knowing you've been substituted as a goalkeeper. That's
But
probably
you do
why
that
they
with
don't.
players.
You do, yeah. But it's probably easier to do that. There probably is a much deeper reason as to why they don't do it. Should they? Probably. I mean,
it's
but
because
do you do it
nobody
after one
else
mistake?
does it. If one team did it and everybody did it, it wouldn't be such a big thing. If Liverpool had done it, it'd be on the back pages, wouldn't it?
The thing is, there's normally a decent gap between your first team keeper and your substitute goalkeeper. Instance, Alisson and Adrian. We know Alisson's flipping a lot better than Adrian, but
I mean, there's another team that rings a bell, doesn't it? Who made a couple of mistakes and the game finished 3-3, didn't it?
De Gea, yeah, top bloke.
I mean, I looked at all the comments by Manchester United fans, and there were three players that really got it. And the three players are the same three players we talk about week in, week out. So Gea, why does he not do anything? Maguire can be blamed for two of the goals. Rashford can be blamed for missing a ton. And De Gea, well,
bad, isn't it?
What do you say? And we say this week in, week out. So why does Ole Gunnar Solskjaer do absolutely nothing when we can see it?
Will you imagine Ole putting his £80 million defender on the bench week in, week out? You can't do that. He also is the captain, apparently. Rashford feeds the kids, so you've got to play him. He also is their number 10. He also is this the main focal point of the United team. You could say it's Bruno Fernandes now.
Who are they playing? Who are they playing?
1 sec. They are playing West Ham at home, but they're in the FA Cup.
Right.
Oh wait, hold up. Well, that's the wrong thing.
Hold up. I'm holding up. I'm holding up.
No, they are playing West Brom.
Right. Well, that'd be interesting then. So, right. So they do stand a chance in the next game.
Well, I mean, they're away, so even bigger chance. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, they'll probably get a dub. In the instance of Liverpool, I can't get the impression we're going to win, actually, because we're away from home, which we're much better at the moment for some reason.
And you're playing who? Sorry, Tottenham?
Leicester.
No, Leicester.
We always do decent against Leicester. So I don't know whether Vardy's back as well. If he's not, then I reckon we walk it.
I am gonna back Liverpool. I know I'm daft, but I think Liverpool have just got to fight for the top four.
Yeah.
Forget the winning the title. Shut up about that. That's boring. That's gone. Okay, and I think everybody else should shut up about it.
Klopp's told everyone to shut up about it as well.
It's getting annoying. You can see Liverpool aren't good enough. Okay, so we've got West Brom playing United. Well, I have to ask. I mean, we've talked about Paul Pogba before, and Salah and everybody else. Can I ask, what do you think is going to happen to all these players? Where normally during the summer, sort of Salah and Pogba and Grealish and Neymar and Sancho, there'll be all the chat of which team they're going to. Barcelona are now billions of pounds in debt. Real Madrid are trashed and in real trouble. Do you know? It's where did Coutinho go?
Barca,
because do you know they haven't paid Liverpool for him yet? They haven't got the money. They haven't even paid him yet.
Isn't it still 35 million they've got to pay?
Yeah, Liverpool, they haven't got the money, so they're not going to be buying anybody, and nor are Real Madrid. Where does Paul Pogba, Salah, Grealish, Neymar, and Sancho actually go? I mean, surely United can't buy all of them.
No, but Man City probably could.
Just say, Manchester City are actually looking at Ings and
Lukaku.
Lukaku. Do you
Lukaku does not fit their style of play, does he? He's
even
not
Ings
gonna,
a bit
no.
past it as well?
Yeah, even Ings, like, very, very good striker. But he's not on the Man City team. Well, I wouldn't have said it's not the player I'd go for.
So West Ham then.
West Ham. Who have they got?
No, sorry, you read them down. You read them
Yeah,
down.
I was going to say. Crystal Palace, Burnley. Palace.
Well, do you know, Brighton played Burnley, and it came as a bit of a shock to them, because if you see the way Brighton play, which you have, and it's all sort of big players, isn't it, that sort of, out muscle in the box and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, of course, when they came up against Burnley, they were actually the small ones, and the poor keeper had never been pushed around like that before, and they couldn't cope with it. And it was funny to actually see Brighton beaten with their own style of game. It was a bit like sort of watching football back in the 70s on a mud pitch with big blokes kicking the hell out of each other. It was quite entertaining, and Brighton were actually outdone by Burnley in that type of football.
It was 1-1, to be fair.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I think it was entertaining. It was entertaining, that was for sure.
Yeah. In terms of this game, I reckon if we did like a table of where we thought of all the results that we've done, I reckon Palace would probably be at the top, because we probably say that Palace win every single game.
Yes, I know. We got to get one right, surely.
But I mean, we probably get most of them right. To be fair, I reckon they will beat Burnley.
Do you?
I don't see why they wouldn't. Eze and Zaha.
Is he around still though?
Zaha, I don't know
actually. Injured.
He might be, to be fair. But I mean, Eze's been carrying the team, so yeah.
I think that's a draw. I think Burnley will not lose, because those teams at the bottom, 3 teams at the bottom, are about, I think it's about 8 points, and I think Burnley would just be happy with a point.
Fair. Man City, Tottenham. Jose won't be happy probably, so I'll go Man City.
Tottenham.
They did win. They won 2-0.
You're talking irreplaceable players.
Which one?
Kane. I mean, do you know what gets me is this people moan about Mourinho's tactics and the like, but he's always played 6 at the back. He always has. He plays the back 4 with the 2, and every time the opposition get the ball, he's got a lineup of 6 at the back. He's always played that football. And if you play 6 defenders, what do you think you're going to get, in all honesty?
Yeah.
And people say, oh, well, the trouble is he relies on. But like I say, take Vardy out, take Van Dijk out, take Fernandez out, all these teams. The only team that seems to get away with taking their star players out, and so another one turns up, is City, isn't it? Yeah. They seem to cope with taking out their star players. And they they didn't even play with a number 9, for goodness sake, because Aguero's not around.
Yeah, there was a Man City that beat us without Aguero and without De Bruyne, which is actually quite sad when you think about it. But this is the thing: people expect the same results even when you don't have your best players there. It's like, yes, you're going to have a bit better depth, but that depth isn't going to be nowhere near the same as it is as a world-class player that you have in your team. So,
well, Liverpool aren't the same team at all.
Liverpool aren't the same team. Leicester are never the same team without Vardy. Tottenham aren't the same team without Kane. Kane has made Tottenham relevant for the last 10 years, essentially. He's the only reason they're actually still really a football team that
if you take the 2 of them out, take Son came
Yeah,
out
take
and
Son
what he
out.
bloody got. And talking
Yeah.
of which, Bale. Why
Bastard.
have they got him? And the other player that they've got that I can't understand is where did I write that?
Dele Alli. I know
Dele
what you're going
Alli.
to say.
Why is he still there?
You do wonder. I mean, you're going to
I
assume he
think
didn't.
that's cruel.
You got to assume that during January it was just a money thing as to why he didn't leave.
I think that's cruel. I mean, Spurs are ruined his career.
Yeah. Thing is, it was before Mourinho even got there, wasn't it? That Ali started to really decline. And the things we talk about decline, it was declining at the age of like 23, 24.
But put him
which
in another
shouldn't
team. He needed to go somewhere to be a
send
star.
send him on loan or something.
I mean,
Thing
a
is,
team like West Ham would have been perfect at that time.
yeah, I
He
think
needs to go somewhere else.
think of like the Dele Alli of 3 or 4 years ago. You would have put hundreds of pounds on him being in the England team, let alone the England squad for the Euros this summer. He's not going to get in.
Who's the other player that has just got moved? And
Lingard.
Lingard. So how do you brain up here? See,
I know.
me and you. Lingard, exactly. I mean, isn't he a Lingard?
Essentially, like they've both performed very well at times. Lingard goes and scores 2 in his first game for West Ham, doesn't he?
He'll be fine at West Ham, won't he? He won't score every game, of course, but
He'll
looks
play.
really good for England.
Well, it's those type of like attacking midfielders who go to a slightly lesser team and then perform really well. Minamino actually started a game, scored for Southampton in his first game.
They reckon he looked pretty good, didn't they?
Yeah.
They reckon he faded by the end, but let's be blunt about this. So did Southampton.
So yeah, to be fair, they did lose to Newcastle though.
I know, but but Newcastle are doing all right because Graham Jones turned up from Bournemouth. As I said before, they took the trainer out of Bournemouth, and Bournemouth have lost every game or something, and put him in Newcastle, who've won every game. I wonder if it's down to management.
Very true.
Doesn't take much to figure out, does it?
No.
And so we'll finish there. Except let's finish on something that I do want to do. Your last question, and then I'm going to say what a couple of things we'll do next week. Your last question is, how good are Brighton? I can't figure that one out.
Average, but have good organisation and big centre backs.
They could do with a manager with some flair, though, couldn't they? I mean, he's
a bit boring, isn't
grey, isn't he?
It's a bit dull.
Grey. If he stood against a grey wall, you wouldn't see him. Yeah. That's cruel. I hope he doesn't watch this. And I doubt it.
I doubt it, mate.
And the other thing is next week, because what I didn't get round to this week was looking at the European Super Cup. Now I have looked into it and what UEFA and FIFA have proposed to the teams and what it looks like is going to happen in 2024, because it is going to change whether they are in charge or the teams are in charge. They're sort of fiddling around with at the moment. But I will talk about that next week. I will do that. And the other thing I want to do, Kieran, is ask you to have a look at if you could change any rule in football to make it more fun. What would you change? As an example, you'd make the corner kick area 10 by 10 foot, for instance. Yeah, or throw-ins of how you take a throw-in, whether you can just lob it rather than this sort of thing. Yeah, so if you could, the 6 yard box, make it, I mean that wouldn't make a lot of difference anymore, but that sort of thing. Yeah.
Are you asking me this question now?
No, this is for next week. I want you to have a think. Make the game 60 minutes instead of So it's 30 minutes each. Not something that you want to happen, but something that you think would actually improve the game and make it much more of a laugh.
Okay. No,
And if anybody's got any ideas, please put them at the bottom, or do that next week, and we'll both come up with an idea on how to improve the game and make it more entertaining. Okay, thank you everybody for joining in. Thank you, Kieran. Now you can get on and do some proper work.
Mate.
And I've got to go and clean the toilets. Okay. No, I don't. No, I don't. Right, thank you very much, everybody. I'll stop recording now.